Welcome back, everyone, to another story. We really hope you enjoy this story. My name is Kyle. I'm 24 years old, and I work as a junior QA tester at a small indie game studio in Portland, Oregon. It's honestly not the most glamorous job in the world. I spend most of my days clicking through the same 3 tutorial levels over and over trying to find bugs and writing up little reports about clipping issues and audio glitches. But the pay is decent, and my boss lets me work from home 2 days a week, so I really couldn't complain. Most of my friends from college ended up in soul-crushing corporate jobs, so I always figured I got lucky ending up somewhere that at least involved video games. Anyway, the reason I'm telling you all this is because about 6 months ago, the studio I work for got bought out by a much bigger tech company called Neuralink. And pretty much overnight, everything changed. We went from making cute little puzzle platformers to being folded into this massive VR division. And suddenly there were engineers in lab coats walking around the office and secret meeting rooms that only certain badges could open. And the whole vibe just got really weird, really fast. Most of my coworkers hated it, but I actually thought it was kind of cool. I mean, when else in your life do you get to see actual bleeding-edge tech being developed right in front of you? So about 3 weeks ago, my new boss, a woman named Dr. Patel, called me into her office and told me they needed volunteers for a closed beta test of something called Project Mirror. She explained that it was a next-generation full-immersion VR system that used a brainwave mapping headset to transfer the player's motor control directly into an in-game avatar. No controllers, no haptic suits, just pure neural input. She said they needed testers who were familiar with games but who also had no prior VR injuries or motion sickness issues, and my name had come up on the list. I'll be honest with you, I said yes immediately. I didn't even ask about the pay or the hours or anything, I just wanted to try it out. She smiled and said, "Great, we'll get you in the lab tomorrow morning, 9 sharp. Bring a change of clothes because the sessions can get sweaty the next morning." I showed up at the Neuralink building at 8:45 with a gym bag over my shoulder and my badge already clipped to my shirt. Dr. Patel met me at the elevator and took me down to sub-level 3, which I didn't even know existed. The whole floor was one giant lab space, with these big white pods lined up along the walls and cables running everywhere, and there was a team of maybe 6 or 7 engineers already there, sipping coffee and prepping stations. So how does this thing actually work? I asked her as we walked toward the first pod. "Well, Kyle," she said back to me, "the headset reads about 4,000 different neural signatures in real time and translates them into avatar movement. But the interesting part is the mapping algorithm. We don't just copy your movements onto a generic character. We actually reshape the avatar's proportions to match your neurological body schema. So when you move, it feels natural because the avatar is essentially a mirror of how your brain perceives your own body." Okay, that sounded a little intense, but I nodded and pretended I understood most of what she said. She led me over to a changing room and handed me this weird-looking suit made out of some kind of stretchy silver fabric. It looked kind of like a wetsuit but thinner, and there were tiny sensors sewn into the seams. She told me to put it on and then meet her back at pod number 3. The suit was surprisingly comfortable once I got it on. It hugged my body without being tight, and the sensors were so flat I couldn't even feel them. I walked out into the lab, and Dr. Patel gestured for me to sit in the pod, which was basically a padded reclining chair with a huge helmet suspended above it. She helped me get settled, and then lowered the helmet over my head, and I heard a soft click as it locked into place. "All right, Kyle, we're going to start the calibration in a few seconds," she said, her voice coming through a speaker inside the helmet. "You'll feel a slight tingling sensation at the base of your neck. That's normal. Just relax and let the system read your baseline." The tingling started almost immediately, and it was actually kind of pleasant, like when your foot falls asleep, but in a good way. Then the visor lit up, and I found myself standing in a huge, empty white room. The graphics were absolutely insane. I could see every stitch on my avatar's clothes, and when I looked down at my hands, they moved exactly like my real hands did with zero lag. It was seriously the coolest thing I'd ever experienced, except for one thing. My avatar wasn't a character I had designed. It was just this generic guy with brown hair and a plain gray t-shirt and jeans. I asked Dr. Patel about it, and she said not to worry. The initial calibration used a default template, but once the neural mapping completed, the avatar would begin to reshape itself over the next few sessions to match my actual body schema. We ran through some basic tests that first day, just walking around, picking up objects, throwing balls at targets. It was fun, but honestly, not that different from any other high-end VR game I'd played after about 90 minutes. She brought me out of the pod and I felt totally fine. No motion sickness, no headache, nothing. She said, "Great. See you tomorrow, same time." And I headed home, feeling like I had one of the coolest jobs in the world. The second session was the same as the first, mostly just walking around and doing motor tests. But I did notice that my avatar looked a tiny bit different. When I glanced in the virtual mirror they had set up in the training room, the face was a little softer, and the shoulders were maybe slightly narrower. But it was so subtle I figured I was imagining it. By the fourth session, I definitely wasn't imagining it. My avatar's hair had gotten longer and darker, and the jawline was noticeably softer. The gray t-shirt somehow looked like it fit differently too when I asked Dr. Patel about it. She checked her tablet and said, that's interesting. Your neural body schema is shifting more aggressively than we expected. Are you sure you're comfortable with the mapping? Continuing, I mean, it's just a video game character, right? I said back to her, yeah, it's fine, let's keep going. She gave me this look for a second, like she wanted to say something else, but then she just nodded and typed something into her tablet. That night I went home and I couldn't stop thinking about the avatar, the way it was changing. Kind of freaked me out, but also kind of fascinated me. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and I noticed my own hair actually looked a little different. My sideburns, which had always been kind of scraggly, were basically gone, and my skin looked smoother than usual. I chalked it up to the stress of a new project, and went to bed by the 7th session. I was really starting to worry. My avatar was now definitely feminine. I mean, it still had short hair and androgynous clothes, but the face was clearly a young woman's face, and when I moved my hips, there was a distinct sway to the walk that I definitely was not consciously doing more. Concerning, I was starting to see similar changes in my real body. My chest had these weird sore spots that I'd never had before, and my jeans were feeling loose in the waist and tight in the hips. Dr. Patel, I said, as she was helping me out of the pod, I think something's wrong. Is any of this stuff supposed to affect me physically outside the sim? She went completely quiet for a second, and then she said, Kyle, let's talk in my office. We sat down and she closed the door and she took a deep breath before she started talking. Okay, Kyle, here's the thing. The Project Mirror system was originally designed to create the illusion of embodiment inside VR. But during trials, we discovered that the neural mapping process has some unexpected side effects on the user's real body. It turns out that when the brain rewrites its body schema strongly enough, the endocrine system begins to follow the schema's blueprint. Wait, I said, what are you saying? She said back to me, I'm saying that your body is beginning to hormonally shift to match the avatar. The system has been reading you, and it's decided that your true internal body schema doesn't match your assigned physical form. I sat there for probably a full minute just staring at her. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Are you telling me this thing is turning me into a girl? I finally asked, and she nodded very slowly and said, not exactly turning you into one, Kyle. It's more that your brain has always had a female body schema, and the system is just now allowing your body to catch up. I didn't know what to say to that. I mean, I'd never thought of myself as anything other than a regular guy. Sure, I'd never been super macho, and I'd always liked things like cooking and gardening and quieter hobbies, but I never sat around thinking I should be a woman. She seemed to sense that I was overwhelmed, and she said, listen, we can stop the sessions today right now, and the changes might revert on their own, or they might not. Honestly, we haven't had this happen this quickly with anyone else, and we don't know for sure how reversible it is, but if you want to keep going, I need you to understand that continuing will almost certainly make the changes permanent. I asked her how long I had to decide, and she said, think about it overnight. If you're not back tomorrow morning, I'll assume you're out, and we'll close your file. I went home that evening in a total daze. I sat on my couch for hours, just staring at nothing. I tried to eat something and couldn't. I tried to play games and couldn't around 11 at night. I finally got up and stood in front of my bathroom mirror and really looked at myself for the first time in weeks. My face was softer than I remembered it. My cheekbones sat higher. My lips were a little fuller. My eyebrows had thinned out into a much more graceful arch than I ever remembered having, and my hair, which I usually kept short, was hanging down past my ears in soft waves. I hadn't even really registered it growing. I lifted up my shirt and my chest was clearly not flat anymore. There were 2 definite small mounds there, tender to the touch, and my waist was smaller and my hips were wider. And the strangest thing about all of it was that I didn't feel horrified. I felt like I was seeing something I'd been waiting to see my whole life without knowing I was waiting. I just stood there for a long, long time, looking at myself, and slowly a smile spread across my face. The next morning I was back at Neuralink at 8:45. Sharp Dr. Patel saw me walk in, and she smiled and said, welcome back, Kyle. Ready for session? 8, I nodded and said, yeah, I'm ready. And by the way, I've been thinking about it, and I want to finish the mapping. I want to see this through to the end. She looked genuinely relieved and said, okay, In that case, I need to have you sign a few additional consent forms and then we can dive in. I signed the paperwork without really reading it and got suited up and climbed into the pod session. 8 was different from all the previous ones. The moment I entered the virtual space, the training room was gone, and instead I was standing in this beautiful sunlit meadow with wildflowers everywhere, and Dr. Patel's voice came through the helmet and said, "Okay, Kyle, for the final mapping stages, we're moving to environments that will help your schema fully lock in. You can take as long as you need in each one." I looked down at my avatar and gasped. My hair was long now down past my shoulders and a rich chestnut brown. My body in the silver suit was unmistakably a young woman's slim waist, gentle curves, smaller hands with slender fingers. When I lifted my hand up to my face, I felt everything happen in perfect sync. It wasn't like controlling a character. It was like being in a body that had always been mine and just briefly forgotten. I spent probably 2 hours in that meadow, just walking around picking flowers, listening to birds, trying different movements. I found myself sitting cross-legged in the grass and then reclining back to look at the sky, and the way my body moved and settled felt so completely right that I almost started crying inside the helmet. The whole time I was in there, I could feel little tingles running through my real body, little pulses of warmth in my chest and hips and thighs, and I knew it wasn't just my mind changing anymore. When I finally came out of the pod, I looked at myself in the reflection of the darkened monitor, and even though I still had my regular male clothes on, I could see how much I had changed. My face was smaller and more delicate, my collarbones were more pronounced, and my whole posture was different. I turned to Dr. Patel, and I said, "Can I see myself in a real mirror?" She took me to the women's changing room, which was empty, and she stood outside while I went in. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, and I peeled off the silver suit, and I just looked at my body. It wasn't fully female yet. The changes were happening, but they weren't complete. But I could clearly see the direction it was going, and it looked like the person I was becoming was someone I would actually want to be. I ran my hands over my hips and my waist and up to my chest, and I felt so calm when I walked out. Dr. Patel asked me how I was feeling, and I said, "Honestly, I feel more like myself than I have in years." She smiled at that and said, "That's what we've been hearing from a few of the other people who went all the way through." "Wait," what I said. "There are other people." She nodded and said, "There have been 3 others so far. All of them chose to complete the mapping when it started showing them their true body schema. You're the 4th. We haven't publicized it. Obviously, the tech is too new and too legally complicated, but we've been quietly running these calibrations for about a year now." I asked her when the physical changes would finish, and she said, "We usually see full stabilization about 4 to 6 weeks after the final mapping session. Your body is essentially rebuilding itself around the new blueprint, and that takes time. Your hormones will settle, your bone structure will finish reshaping, your voice will adjust, and you'll probably want to work with our transition specialist to handle things like your legal documents and wardrobe and social introductions." I spent the rest of that week at home, mostly since Dr. Patel had prescribed me a bunch of supplements and told me to rest as much as possible. While my body worked through the changes, I ordered some new clothes online, because none of my old stuff fit right anymore. And honestly, it was kind of fun going through and picking out things I never would have let myself buy. Before I got some soft sweaters and jeans that actually fit my new hips, and even a couple of dresses which I still wasn't sure I'd be brave enough to wear, but I wanted to have them. The very first package that arrived was a set of bras. Dr. Patel had actually put me in touch with a woman named Grace, who ran a small online shop that specialized in fitting girls who were going through medical transitions, and she'd sent me 3 different styles, in what she guessed my size would be based on some photos I sent her. When I opened the box, I just sat on my bed staring at them for probably 10 minutes before I finally worked up the nerve to actually try one on the clasp. Took me forever to figure out. I ended up doing it up in front of me and then twisting it around, which apparently is what most girls do their first few weeks. And once I got the straps adjusted, I stood up and looked in the mirror, and I couldn't believe how different I looked with actual proper support. My whole silhouette changed. My shoulders looked more relaxed, and my waist looked smaller, and my chest just looked right for the first time in weeks. I put on one of the softer sweaters over it, a pale pink one that I'd almost put back in the cart 3 times before I ordered it, and I paired it with a pair of high-waisted jeans, and I stood in front of the mirror, and I honestly just stared at myself for a really long time. The girl looking back at me was pretty in that quiet way that some girls are pretty, not runway model pretty, but girl next door. Pretty, the kind of face you'd notice in a coffee shop, and then find yourself thinking about. Later she had my eyes, though the exact same eyes I'd always had, and looking into them in the mirror was this really strange and comforting moment, like meeting yourself for the first time. I decided that afternoon I was going to try going out for the first time since the changes had started. I put on a little bit of makeup. Rachel had sent me a starter kit and a link to some YouTube tutorials for beginners, and I did the bare minimum: a bit of mascara, some tinted lip balm, and a little bit of blush. I honestly had no idea what I was doing, but the effect was subtle and nice. I grabbed a purse Marcus had bought for me as a sort of welcome gift, and I walked down to the little coffee shop at the end of my block. The whole walk there, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every step I took, my hips moved differently than they used to, and I felt so aware of it, like everyone on the street must be staring at me. But when I actually paid attention, nobody was staring at all. I was just a girl walking down the sidewalk to get coffee. I pushed open the door, and the barista looked up and smiled and said, "Hi, what can I get started for you?" And I opened my mouth and my new voice came out, and I ordered a vanilla latte, and she rang me up, and I sat down by the window and drank my coffee and read a book on my phone. And it was the most ordinary thing in the world, and also the most incredible feeling I'd ever had. I ordered some new clothes online because none of my old stuff fit right anymore. The coffee shop trip gave me a huge boost of confidence, and over the next few days I kept pushing myself to do more little errands. The grocery store, the pharmacy, the post office, each time it got a tiny bit easier, and each time I noticed I was walking a little more naturally and standing a little more comfortably in my own skin. The small things kept surprising me, like the way my hair kept falling in front of my face, and I had to keep tucking it behind my ear, and the way my hands looked so much smaller, wrapped around a coffee cup, and the way strangers held doors open for me, without me having to say anything about it. On the 10th day after my final session, my roommate Marcus finally got a good look at me. I'd been avoiding him, mostly staying in my room, or going out only when he was at work. But that morning, I came out of the shower in a robe and we ran right into each other in the hallway. He stopped dead and stared at me for like 10 full seconds before he said, "Kyle, is that you?" And I sighed and said, "Yeah, Marcus. It's me. Sit down. Let me explain." We sat at the kitchen table and I told him everything. The beta test, the neural mapping, the physical changes, all of it. He listened without interrupting, which honestly I really appreciated when I finished. He was quiet for a while, and then he said back to me, "Okay, first of all, that's insane. Second of all, you look really good. And third of all, are you actually happy about this?" And I thought about it for a second and I said, "Yeah, Marcus, I think I actually am." He nodded and said, "Okay, then I'm happy for you too. What do you want me to call you now?" That stopped me short. I hadn't even thought about a name. I'd just been thinking of myself as Kyle still, but that name didn't really feel like it fit anymore. I sat there thinking for a minute, and then I said, "What about Kayla?" And he grinned and said, "Kayla, it is welcome to the world, Kayla." Over the next few weeks, the changes finished up, my chest developed into a modest but definitely feminine shape, and my hips widened out and my waist pulled in and my legs got longer and slimmer somehow, and my face finished settling into what I could only describe as a really pretty version of a face I sort of recognized from the avatar. My voice was the last thing to change. It happened almost overnight one morning. I woke up and I said good morning to Marcus, and out came this soft, warm, feminine voice that startled me so much I almost dropped my coffee. I went back to Neuralink to finish up the paperwork, and Dr. Patel was really pleased with how everything had settled. She introduced me to the transition specialist, a woman named Rachel, who was incredibly kind and walked me through everything I needed to do to update my legal identity and adjust to daily life as a woman. She also connected me with the 3 other people who had gone through the process before me, and we all ended up becoming really close friends. We get lunch together once a month and just talk about our experiences and share tips. It's honestly been one of the best support systems I've ever had. My studio was surprisingly cool about the whole thing. When I came back to work after taking some time off, Dr. Patel had actually briefed HR ahead of time, and everyone was really supportive. My job title is still Junior QA Tester, but I got moved to a new project team, and I've been getting way better assignments than before. I think partly because Dr. Patel put in a good word for me, but also partly because I feel so much more confident and comfortable in my own skin now that it shows in my work. About 2 months into being Kayla, I met someone, his name is Jordan, and he's a UX designer who works on the same project I do. We went out for coffee after a team meeting, and it turned into dinner, and then another dinner, and now we've been dating for about 3 months. I met him when he came by my desk to ask about some interface bug I'd flagged, and he stayed way longer than he needed to just chatting about game design, and I remember watching him leave and thinking, oh no, I like this guy, which was in itself kind of a milestone because I'd never really felt that way about anyone before. Back when I was Kyle, I'd dated a couple of girls in college, but nothing ever really clicked, and I always sort of assumed I just wasn't a romantic person. Turns out I was just looking in the wrong direction. Our first real date was at this little Italian place downtown, and I spent probably 2 hours getting ready, which was ridiculous because it was just dinner. But I wanted everything to be perfect. I wore a black dress that Rachel had helped me pick out, and I curled my hair with an actual curling iron for the first time ever, which took me like 45 minutes and involved burning my thumb twice. But when I looked in the mirror before I left the apartment, I felt beautiful in a way I don't think I'd ever felt before Jordan met me outside the restaurant, and when he saw me, his whole face lit up and he said back to me, "Wow, Kayla, you look amazing." And I felt myself blush all the way to the tips of my ears. He doesn't know about the Neuralink stuff, which is fine because I've been advised not to talk about it publicly. And honestly, it just doesn't feel relevant anymore. This is my body and this is my life. And it doesn't matter how I got here. It just matters that I'm here. I still work at the same studio. I still play video games in my free time. I still love cooking and gardening and all the same quiet hobbies I always did. But now I do them as me, the real me. The version of me that was always underneath waiting to come out. I look back at photos of myself from a year ago, and I honestly barely recognize that person. He was always kind of anxious and kind of tired looking, and kind of dimmed down in every photo. Like there was a light behind his eyes that just never quite turned on. I turned on my phone camera the other day just to check my hair before a meeting, and I caught a glimpse of myself, and I looked so bright, so alive, so present, and I just stood there for a second, smiling at myself in the little screen. Sometimes people ask me if I regret doing the beta test, if I ever wish I could go back and undo it. And honestly, the answer is no, not even a little. I know I got lucky. Most people never get the chance to discover something like this about themselves, and to have their bodies actually align with who they really are. I got to skip years of struggling and searching, and I got to just wake up as myself, and I will always be grateful for that, Dr. Patel, and I still keep in touch. She left Neuralink a few months ago and started her own clinic, focusing on helping people who want to go through the mapping process. Now that the tech is being cautiously rolled out to the public, she's asked me a few times if I'd be willing to speak with new patients and share my story, and I keep telling her yes, absolutely, I'd love to help. I want other people to know that this is possible, that they don't have to feel stuck in a body that doesn't fit them. I couldn't be happier with my current life. I have a job, I love friends, I love a boyfriend who thinks I'm wonderful, and a body that finally feels like mine. I can't wait to see what the future holds, and I hope that if there's anyone out there who's been feeling like something inside them doesn't match what they see in the mirror, that they know they're not alone, and that maybe someday soon they'll get their own chance to become themselves too. Thanks for watching this video more. Videos will be coming very soon. We would really appreciate it if you would like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.